Tears in Rain. Rutger Hauer's 42-word monologue means something. These words, on their own, mean nothing. For some reason, these words in the 1982 film Blade Runner carries weight for so many people. The monologue condenses a philosophical conundrum that remains as a shadow, lurking for the viewer throughout this iconic film. There is something odd about a movie that tells us that we are meaningless, based on a future that never was, in a reality that never happened, feels more real than ever before. Suddenly, a human touch, the absence that remains now, felt out of place beforehand. This video essay is going to tackle this lack of meaning, this lack of human connection, this loneliness and feeling of a certain sort of destitution that is present in both individuals and Blade Runner. And so, inherently to connect these two pieces, this video essay is going to tackle a key possibility as to why people feel more connected and understanding of the true meaning of Blade Runner than ever before. A true inner loneliness and identity crisis present within Blade Runner. Firstly, before we get into the details of how Blade Runner captures this essence, how it captures the viewer within its world, we must set out how this is. How is this world created? What is this world? To understand any world, we must go back to its origins as to how it works in its current form. Blade Runner was directed by Ridley Scott and was based off the Philip K. Dick novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, published in 1968. The story is set in the future of 2019. Unfortunately, this is a problem with science fiction writing generally. If you set out predictions for our own reality, you set the year too close, it becomes far-fetched. Set it too far, it is ridiculed. Set your year as something unspecific, you get criticized for being vague. But let's not get carried away with minor details such as the number it happens to take place. The main premise is that we are set in this dystopian future, where after calamities of apocalyptic proportions, many people begin to emigrate to off-world colonies. They migrate to these places in the hopes of a better future with guaranteed luxuries. Obviously, this is loosely based off the attempts by various nations to encourage people to emigrate to various regions with the promise of luxury to benefit their expansionist desires. However, one must acknowledge that to provide supposed luxury, there must be a lack of it at home, implying neither lack of ability to provide for the people or the lack of desire. The need for such mass emigration from Earth would therefore imply there is a great failings in fulfillment at home. This is where we follow our protagonist, Deckard, a man who chooses to stay on Earth, not out of his love for his home city of Los Angeles in the year 2019, but presumably out of one of two reasons. The first being, he, much like many Earth dwellers, does not possess the wealth to leave this floating rock. Or maybe the other reason, that he enjoys his line of work on this planet, retiring androids. This is a new factor into Blade Runner society that we do not have in our own. Replicants. Pure synthetic people. Synthetic emotions, synthetic brains, synthetic memories. They have been created by corporations to fill certain niches. They are superior to humans in certain tasks, such as strength or intelligence. Depending on what the replicant is needed for, a replicant to harvest minerals, you're hardly going to need it to solve equations. However, replicants are retired after 4 years due to the fact this is the length they need to create within themselves empathetic abilities. Deckard's job is to retire replicants when they have lived longer than they should have, or step out of line. Those replicants, they are capable of much more, and there are not many things that separate them from humans by design. Because of that fact, they are treated like much less than humans. For Deckard, they may look like humans and may act like humans, but ultimately they are not. They are not like you and me, and that's what makes them deserve their treatment. They cannot feel the things you and I feel, they cannot be us, and never will. The world of Blade Runner is an inherently caged one, and the keys have rotted away. No point in being a replicant, or you will be retired in a matter of years or months, depending what happens. No point being human, as life on Earth is terrible anyway. Your best chance in life is just going off somewhere, and hopefully you'll get what was advertised. Hopefully. It says a lot that the best chance you have in life is just leaving. Just leave. Blade Runner's world is one of apathetic collapse. The society is repressive. Everyone knows this world isn't working. In some ways, there's a similarity with those Deckard hunts and himself. Everyone he retires is trying to escape. Whether they deserve it or not is a different story. These replicants are attempting to escape their reality. In some ways, Deckard is doing the same. Killing replicants, eating unusual foods, and doing his job is an escape from the fact he is nothing. Much like the replicants, his life has no value. He has no emotions. In a way, he is lonelier than those he hunts. At least the replicants have something to connect with each other on. Whereas with Deckard, need more than being human to find someone else. Deckard does not seem to have anyone in his life. He does not seem to value anything. He does not have any hobbies, but for all the moping he seems to do, for all the times he seems to be disgruntled with everything, he does not have anything outside of his job in his life. And when he is out of it, he is just another body, like everyone else in this city. Being lonely is natural, especially for Deckard. Maybe this is what people seem to relate to Deckard so much. He works all day and all night. He is around people, but he's not with them. He simply wants to get that replicant. People feel isolated, and so they project that onto a character that could portray even the slightest similarities onto them. Sometimes these similarities are non-existent, and it is more so a desire of a distorted mirror. Maybe the way we see Deckard as this broken, empty man is a distorted mirror of how we view ourselves, feeling small and alone in a big world. Or maybe the replicants are a distorted mirror into humanity itself. Ask yourself the question, what does it take to be human? Depending on how you answer the question, it could be biological, philosophical, literal, or religious. Whatever the answer you give, it is a reflection of yourself and you. So, in a way, let me rephrase that question. What are you? What makes you, you? What makes you a person? It is a hard question to answer because it is not meant to be all known. And you can change what defines you at any given moment. You can be something else 1 minute to the next, and that makes that definition change. The concept of you could be the same or radically different to someone else. So if nothing can define you specifically, if to this question there's a different answer given by different people, hypothetically on a different day, is what defines a human definable? Let's reposition this question. What makes a replicant any different? Replicants have memories that contain value, Replicants can hold beliefs, replicants can have emotions at some point. Even we take time to develop emotions. So what makes them different? We have an internal clock of when our time is up. We have skills. We are programmed for certain purposes and niches. Replicants, in the grand scheme of things, are also undefinable, yet strikingly similar in this lack of definability. Depending on the way you look at it, you could look at this of humanity in large. We get disconnected and separate ourselves. Suddenly, the other person does not become human. But we are human, because we know we are. Deckard is a human because he knows he's a human. He knows the others are replicants. Is that always true? What separates him from them is the fact he decides they have no value and must be exterminated. Or rather, someone tells him that they are separate and must be exterminated. He is the one who creates that mental barrier. Blade Runner blurs what is a line between humanity and inhumanity, with the slaying of human-like beings seen as righteous, while the death of the human elites that have created this structurally unequal society seems murder. Blade Runner blurs the line of what is human and what is not, what is real and what is fake. Bringing Blade Runner back into connection to reality, it could be argued that, much like Deckard, in that we are living through a dystopian era of isolation and loneliness and meaninglessness, we decide to take out the emotional plug. We migrate to movements or ideas that provide them with worth, as society, by and large, has failed to provide for them, or failed to provide them with inherent purpose. Whether the ideological backbone of this idea is more concrete or not, with some individuals, the fact it is a common idea that modern life is meaningless does not come out of nowhere. This is how it connects to Blade Runner. It may not be literal. We do not have synthetic humans with equal to or better than strength in us. We do not have synthetic humans with equal to or better intelligence than us. But metaphorically, many have created a connection with Deckard's plight and the cries for help within Blade Runner that they feel in their own world. One of the main reasons for science fiction's development and increased popularity is with the steadily increasing pace in which technology has developed, where what would once have taken generations for concepts or advancements to happen is done in the span of decades or even 10 years itself. It could be argued, with this in mind, that humanity has created technology that has outpaced us, in which we have gone so far ahead, we do not know what to do with what we have. This is not arguing for anarcho-primitivism, or that we should go back to some past that only exists in rose-tinted glasses. Far from it. Technological advancements by humanity has made humanity better. Millions of people's lives have been and are being saved by medicine that was once shunned or at the very least prevented. Communication and information has never been more readily available. Societies are freer than they ever were 200 years ago. Many species of animal and fauna are being protected by advancements and people that care, which would not have been possible 300 years ago. Technology being bad is not my argument. What I am going to argue is that many science fiction works, like Blade Runner, have presented the possibility that we use technology as a replacement for humanity and reality itself. Why be someone when you can be with a hologram? This is a key element in modern loneliness that connects with technology. The internet. An increasing number of people are growing up with the internet alongside themselves, or rather, in some cases, in replacement of themselves. People broadly under the age of 30 have been increasingly undergoing a total existential crisis. They feel like they cannot find purpose or meaning for themselves and scream at their screens in the hope it tells them what they are and maybe who they are. Unfortunately, If someone cannot answer the question for you, and you cannot find that answer yourself, you find the answer where you want it to be. You will manifest that answer into what you seek. This is where Deckard and now Blade Runner 2049 come in as a factor. People replicate the inhumanity of Officer K or Deckard as they feel the emptiness in a large, meaningless future world of promises. People want to live in this reality as it is a manifestation of how they perceive themselves. They mold this dystopian nightmare world into what they want it to be, as they see it as such. But to contradict this belief, doing this is to accept despair, or in some ways, to create despair. It is understandable how you could use a movie like Blade Runner as an external expression of despair, or a projection of how you feel or how you perceive your world. But ultimately, it must be reminded that this is the point of a work like Blade Runner. It is a projection of a perceived vision. To reference a work or a thinker who discussed this topic will be Jean Baudrillard. This is done to kind of help picture this concept. Jean Baudrillard was a French theorist who was the author of the academic work Simulacra and Simulation in 1981. This work was a major inspiration for The Matrix. However, what cannot be ignored is the fact Baudrillard espoused that the Wachowskis completely misunderstood his work and believed they did not capture it at all. I will not go into excruciating detail about academic postmodern theories regarding culture, as this video is not about that. I will merely use several concepts to establish my point. Even if Baudrillard decried the idea of him being a postmodernist, essentially one of the fears Baudrillard proposed going forward into the postmodern era is that the simulation, the artificial that is created by humanity, becomes indistinguishable from what is natural, that everyone is a reference without a referent. An example of this idea Baudrillard hypothesized was that of hyperreality. This is the idea that as the difference between supposed real and fake becomes blurred and unrecognizable, we take items from the simulacra, things from fiction, and bring them into reality, making reality indistinguishable from fiction and what is natural. Baudrillard uses Disneyland as an example of hyperreality. Disneyland exists as a concept. The castle is based off something real, but the Disneyland castle itself is not real. Disneyland was made real. Maybe there is something to take from the fact we are taking the fictitious and allowing it to escape our screens. Maybe there's something that connects these ideas with Blade Runner and how we perceive it. We mimic what we see. If we see Blade Runner, we can relate to Blade Runner. So therefore, we mimic Blade Runner, making the fake real. We are making Blade Runner real. We begin to embody Deckard in an odd way. We use Deckard as an outline that will fill ourselves naturally, making the fictional concept of Deckard exist in our reality. In some ways, it could be argued with the increasingly prevalent global mental health crisis occurring in relation to the internet, with assistance by general social and economic conditions. People have begun to turn the aesthetic of cyberpunk realities such as Blade Runner and making it hyper-reality. Not the characters necessarily, as Deckard doesn't exist. You can emulate aspects of Deckard, but the style itself. We are taking our past concepts of the future and making it our own future in some cruel irony. So if we make ourselves the embodiment of a deeply unhappy character in a dystopian world, and therefore we make our world this dystopia, what can be done about it? Much like many other questions asked in this video, is there really a definitive answer? If there are no answers, what makes this question different? I suppose the first part of this is to acknowledge you are your own vessel, not Deckard. Going to a separate reality created within your mind is not going to solve problems outside of it. It's just a movie.
Alright, because every time we watch Godfather, when Michael Corleone shoots those guys in the restaurant, those assholes who tried to kill his dad, and you say it's your favorite scene of all time.
Jesus Christ, AJ. Man, you make me want to cry. It's a movie. You gotta grow up.
It is a good coping mechanism to some extent, but using it as a shield, as an amalgamation of your viewpoint, is not going to change anything by yourself. You are not going to get less lonely by transforming into a lonely and ultimately broken character. What happens to Deckard by the end of Blade Runner? What happens during that iconic Tears in the Rain monologue as he listens to what the replicant he has been hunting this entire time has to say before his final moments? Deckard changes. Roy's words allowed some gears to turn. The ego was snapped. However you read into the scene is obviously up to your own interpretation, but in my interpretation, Deckard realized there is something more to life than what he is currently. Maybe more to others' lives as well. Maybe there's more to even what he considers not to be human. Display more humanity than ever thought. The sight of humanity plants the idea of humanity within Deckard in this very moment. A reconsideration. Reconsiderations can oftentimes arrive from reflections, and reflections can be brought by mirrors. Arguably, Deckard comes to this realization of his lack of humanity by looking in the mirror that was once not there. Maybe that little reconsideration can be something to relate to in hindsight. As much as the future may look like it's rapidly approaching, the past falling out of grasp, and this very moment may appear to be so still in comparison. There is a natural ebb and flow of time, and with the flow of time, change arrives. Never on time, but 5 minutes early or 5 minutes late. Sometimes we change with the flow, sometimes we don't. Sometimes our change causes the flow. It does not matter. Reality is whatever you want it to be, or don't want it to be. Deckard's world is reality, not reality, and possibly reality, depending on what way you want it to be, or how you see it. I suppose that is an example of the natural charm of Deckard's world. It can make you detest it, desire it, or designate it. In some regards, the key themes of Blade Runner has gradually become visible and relatable to many, and in some regards, the Tears in Rain speech has everything some desires or sees in Blade Runner, all within 42 words. The lack of meaning and purpose expressed in these words, the desire for purpose, the isolation, the desire to have humanity for which they are lacking, the only meaning that can be attached is their own memories, and sights that no other can relate to but themselves. Ultimately lonely. Tears in rain. A drop of water that holds value to one, but to an onlooker, another drop on a wet, miserable day in a sprawling dystopia, with no desire for a past or a future, living in the present, but through the expression of one's despair. And life provides hope, change, and humanity for another. Have you seen sea beams glitter in the dark at the Tannhauser Gate? Have you seen attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion? Maybe you haven't. But that doesn't matter. But you have something that made you feel similar to that moment that gives you the same value. Maybe that cherished memory is the key to change, regardless of how you live it. What matters is feeling human. If we do not know what that means anymore or at any point, thanks for watching.